It's watch wrestling with Mike Wellman, yo. Hit the mat hard, let the punches throw. Slams in the drama, your new favorite show. We drop the hot takes, keep the crowd in the flow. Clotheslines, power bombs, suplex the beat. Tune in weekly, we'll take the hot seat. From the ring to the street, the vibe stays elite. Watch wrestling with Mike, nobody can compete. The face and the heel, we break down the deal. Wrestling fan Kris, the man and the myth. Voice of the people, that's a hypodermic needle. Clotheslines, power bombs, suplex the beat. Tune the beat, tune in weekly. We'll take the hot seat. From the ring to the street, the vibe stays elite. Watch wrestling with Mike, nobody can compete. Mike's the name, wrestling's the game. Hit play every week, the vibe.
What's up, gang? Welcome back to Watch Wrestling with Mike Wellman, the podcast that breaks down the biggest stories in and out of the ring. Today we have a special episode planned. Me and wrestling fan Kris, we decided it was time to debate who is the greatest wrestler of all time. Yes, folks, heavy stuff on the podcast today. We figured we hadn't actually put our flags down on who we think is the greatest wrestler of all time. So that is going to be the subject of our discussion today. Thank you for hitting that play button. We appreciate you here. As always, like I said, my name is Mike Wellman. I am the host of this fine wrestling podcast. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, the voice of the people, the notorious wrestling fan Kris. What's up, Kris?
What is up, Mike?
Still playing the intro music here. Yes, Kris, I know that you have an entire dossier on Crash Holly for this episode, and I'm going to ask you to throw it out.
Wow. What am I supposed to do now?
We're here to talk about the greatest wrestlers of all time, and ultimately, we're not going to rank them because it's a subjective opinion, but we're going to talk about a lot of wrestlers that we think are the best. And then we're going to ultimately give you guys the one, the one that stands out to us as the person that we think is the greatest of all time. So we do have some criteria, although it is subjective and it is our opinion. When I think about the greatest wrestler of all time, I think the highest criteria needs to be from bell to bell. In the ring, the performance you do in the wrestling match, meaning you have to know how to wrestle. You have to be the best wrestler. Now, as far as what puts you over someone else who might claim to be the best in-ring wrestler, well, being at the top of the wrestling business is a signal that you are the best. So we're going to factor that in somewhat as well. So a lot of these guys are going to be folks who were, at the top of the card, top of the business. And then character work as well. Much less important to me with the greatest wrestler of all time, but kind of a tiebreaker, so to speak. Who was the better character? Who sold me on their persona more? And I really mean in the match still, right? Like the ring psychology aspect of it. Who told me via their wrestling the best stories, right? And then a further tiebreaker is if you have the best match of the night, the best match of the show, the best match of the year, who had the most of those, right? Like in this category of people who had the best matches or the best performances, who did it the most? That would be sort of final tiebreaker, in my opinion. Is there anything else that you want to consider here, Kris?
Those are the major ones. I mean, yeah, that's well said, because sometimes their persona, or like you said, their gimmick, as long as it adds to the wrestling, we're not necessarily talking about promo skills. We're talking about bell to bell. So I get that, and I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and promo skills, I guess, matter because it's kind of a total package. And some of the guys we're going to talk about are also some of the best promos, but there are definitely guys that are the best promos that are not on this list. You know?
Yes, I was thinking of Dusty Rhodes, basically, is why I brought that up. who's a good wrestler, definitely a good wrestler, definitely was an ass kicker in his time, definitely had charisma, but he's somewhere at the top, of course, but I don't know if he'll be in this list here.
Right. Again, this is the top of the top. So it's not a popularity contest, I guess. I mean, it kind of is, but not in just the general popularity of a given wrestler, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys we're going to talk about had long careers where they were at the top of the wrestling business for either all or the majority of their careers. And the ones who had shorter runs, their run was just higher, you could say. They just elevated the business in that shorter period of time than someone who maybe was around for 20 years.
Yep.
So let's get into some of these folks here. And we're going to leave out some of your favorites. You're going to have your opinions. So go ahead and leave a comment on the YouTube video or let us know on social media at WWrestlingPod on X and at Watch Wrestling Podcast on Threads. I mostly am on Threads these days. I don't know why. The Rage Bait algorithm on Threads seems to be the most potent for me. So hit us up. Let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? So the first person that we have to talk about here when you're discussing the greatest of all time is the dirtiest player in the game, Ric Flair. Wouldn't you agree, Kris?
Absolutely.
So you can't have a conversation about the greatest wrestlers of all time without including arguably the greatest wrestler of all time, Nature Boy Ric Flair. Not the Nature Boy. Nature Boy Ric Flair.
I mean, it's funny because I just said the whole thing about promo skills, but I mean, one of his biggest strengths was making you care about the match, and I think in this sense, that is what elevated him too, because he would make you care about the match. You'd want to see him lose. He always had something cool to say, and you're like, I can't wait to see this guy in that match. So that was one of his biggest positives, I think.
Well, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And also, one other thing, Kris. These shoes cost more than your house.
That's
What else? What was the other Ric Flair promo that I was just watching the other day? And he said, "It's like if you're mad at me." I don't remember, but yeah. So, do you get points for living the gimmick, Kris?
no, you don't.
well, Ric Flair did and does. Still does.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was at a bar in his 70s calling the bartender a dickhead.
That's, oh, God. I mean, another thing, he also was able to show that you don't always have to win as long as you put on a good match. Sometimes you can lose. You can't lose all the time, but sometimes you can.
So Ric Flair debuted in the 70s, wrestled all the way up into the 2000s. He had that retirement match at WrestleMania 24 against Shawn Michaels that ended with Shawn Michaels saying the famous quote, "I'm sorry, I love you," and then delivering a super kick to Ric Flair that would end his WWE career, because he went on to have a run in TNA, and then he went on to have a final match with the Pacemaker. Well, he didn't have the match against the Pacemaker, but he had a pacemaker in his body, and he had a wrestling match.
What a guy.
And he actually did have a match against the Pacemaker, because the Pacemaker said that he had a couple heart attacks during the match.
Oof.
So
still doing it.
That's
all
what
about living the gimmick.
When you work a high level across 5 decades, there becomes pacemakers involved. So I believe what you were referring to, Kris, is the Southern style of wrestling. Selling, storytelling, pacing, making other people look like $1 million, right?
Yes.
So Flair he had some famous matches, right? Arguably, his best matches were against
Sting.
Okay. Sting was someone that he had his best matches against.
Steamboat,
I would say, for sure. Chi-Town Rumble, Clash of the Champions. Ever heard of it?
I guess not. I said Sting. Well, Clash of the Champions.
So Ric Flair is, I think, the most famous matches. Well, the best matches he ever had, in my opinion, were against Ricky Steamboat. He also lost. He lost the world title to Sting at Clash of the Champions in 1988, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, on the first Clash, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Ric Flair had a legendary career with legendary opponents. Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, Vader, Sting, Ricky Steamboat. Did I already say Dusty?
Yes,
Dusty Rhodes.
You said Dusty, yeah.
He had one of the best Royal Rumble wins of all time, the 1992 Royal Rumble match. Enters at number 3, leaves with the World Wrestling Federation Championship.
Unbelievable.
Vader, obviously that was Starrcade 93. Is that right? 93?
Yeah, that was right after he left his WWE run.
And like I said already, the Shawn Michaels match. So very few people are more culturally relevant outside of wrestling than Ric Flair. I think that's worth talking about. There's rap songs about Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Ric Flair drip. Right? That's obviously that's not part of the criteria. It's just kind of a cultural relevance thing.
But I mean, I was just telling you the other day, like someone I work with was talked about Ric Flair's theme out of nowhere for someone who's retiring and said we should play Ric Flair's theme. And I'm like, how the heck did this guy know about Ric Flair? He's like a 40-year-old bald guy. Like, I don't know. He's not an old NWA fan, you know? He's not a Southern wrestling guy. So cultural relevance is there.
And the most world championships ever won essentially is Ric Flair, because he's called a 16-time world champion. John Cena has now become a 17-time world champion. Really, Ric Flair won way more championships than that because he and Harley Race would just drop the title to each other back and forth overseas and just not talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? So most world championships, the schedule that Ric Flair kept in the 80s is like unmatched as the NWA champion, right? Literally going around the world, wrestling everybody, and like you said, at times losing, you know?
But he was always able to talk his way back into being relevant and then going for the title again.
Right. So you have his career as the NWA world champion in the 80s. Then in the 90s, he kind of goes from WCW over to WWF. He's there for a little while, goes back to WCW. WCW kind of folds. They never really... Flair's kind of like too old for what they were doing at the time. Then WCW's gone, and now Flair is in Evolution, right? And he's the sort of elder statesman of the group. Mm-hmm. And he goes on to become tag team champions with Batista, and that's not even the end of his career. He goes on after that and has like the feud with Shawn Michaels, where every match was his retirement match if he lost. And then finally he made it all the way to WrestleMania 24 and got super kicked. But I wanted to bring up Flair first because of all the guys on here, he is maybe most widely considered to be the best of all time. But I think of the guys we're going to mention next, Flair's wrestling was, I don't know, I guess we're not really ranking people, but I would rank him last, right? Behind everybody else. Because he could have a 5-star match with a mop, as they say. But that's because his moveset wasn't the most extensive, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, anything else you want to say about Nate?
No, I do think that you make a good point. Like, as far as just in ring, it was great. But yeah, I think some of the other wrestlers we're going to mention did come at a higher level. I never got bored with a Ric Flair match. I love all the spots. Keep giving this to me forever. Well, not now, please. You have a pacemaker. But yeah, some of these other guys kind of elevated the in-ring style as well.
All right, so we're going to go from Ric Flair to somebody who may have been the best technical, like, or innovative wrestler of all time, and that is the great Muta Keiji Muto. We have to include Muta on this list if we're talking about the greatest wrestlers of all time. So this is somebody who succeeded across the world, Japan and the United States. His style evolved over time, but all of wrestling evolved with the great Muta in his style. He kind of brought wrestling forward, right? With his I guess you could call it martial arts influence.
Yep.
You know, this complete perfect hybrid of Japanese and American style wrestling. Ever heard of the Shining Wizard, Kris?
Yeah.
You ever hear of the Dragon Screw, bro?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So Keiji Muto invented several wrestling moves.
Incredible.
This one I wrote down, and I almost wanted to like send it to you, but I wanted to save it so you hear it for the first time. So he employed a mist-based offense. You know, he revolutionized the mist-based offense, right?
Yeah, hey.
He had one of the another career spanning decades. Longevity is a key for the Great Muta. 1984 to 2023, right? New Japan, Noah, WCW, All Japan, going from facing people like Masahiro Chono and Junichiro Tenryu to Shinsuke Nakamura and Sting.
Incredible.
Like, he faced Sting at the end of his career as well as the beginning, obviously. Sting, one of his career rivals. Kenta Kobashi, Misawa, Hashimoto, Marufuji. Oh, just some names.
Yeah, some nobodies, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Great Muta, or Keiji Muto, held championships in New Japan, like I said, New Japan, All Japan, Noah, WCW. He was a WCW tag team champion. NWA, he was only the television champion for the NWA, but won the 1995 G1 Climax.
Nice.
World Tag League, 1999 and 2001. And he is a Hall of Famer. We should say Ric Flair is also a WWE two-time Hall of Famer. So, at a time where wrestling was not moving forward technically, he was an innovator. He was a technician and a brawler. Right? Like I said, he influenced wrestling globally. I don't think anybody on this list can claim the mix of success, longevity, innovation, and duality of the Great Muta.
Well said.
And Keiji Muto.
He also had, for me at least, he was the first like crisp, right? Like all of his kicks and martial arts really looked like they were real and they really hurt. He was very fast and quick, and everything he did had impact. And that's just something I always remember from him. Like, it was like quick spring, the handspring elbow that he did. All the kicks were so fast. Even his moonsault is like looks impactful. It doesn't. It's we love Kurt Angle here. I love Kurt Angle, but that, and I love Chad Gable. But that like moonsault they do where they kind of just slowly flip, it looks great. But Muto's was like hurt. It looked like it hurt. Like it was like bam, and he did every move like that. So that was his innovation as well.
Yeah, his kicks definitely were impressive.
Oof.
So, next person we want to talk about on the list of the greatest wrestlers of all time cannot exclude this person, and that is Eddie Guerrero. So, I don't know, man. He might be the best wrestler on this list in ring. It's tough. As we go on here, it's just going to get tougher because in the ring, Eddie Guerrero had it all. Everything. He could sell. He had his technical ability in the ring is so underrated amongst the greatest of all time. Yeah. Right? Match psychology, like I said, highest level work rate. Like, so there's work rate. There's like a pantheon of work rate guys, right? Like Jerry Lynn. Eddie Guerrero is on that top tier of work rate guys.
Yeah.
So, like I said, versatility all around, match psychology, technical ability. It's like he's like a straight A student in wrestling, Eddie Guerrero. A pluses in every aspect of it.
Well said.
Inspired a generation, which we're going to get to. A lot of people on this list have inspired a generation. Also competed in Japan, Mexico, ECW, WCW, and WWE. And
Incredible.
he was a WWE champion. Beat Brock Lesnar at No Way Out in 2004. And he was he won the Best of the Super Juniors in 1996 as Black Tiger number 2.
Wow. I didn't know that about Eddie Guerrero. That's great.
So some of his best matches, obviously, Halloween Havoc 97 against Rey Mysterio.
Of course.
Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 20, another good one.
Love that one.
He won the belt from Brock, like I said, at WrestleMania, or at No Way Out 04. Dean Malenko versus Eddie Guerrero in ECW.
Those are my not favorites, because obviously some of the other ones you mentioned are a little bit better than that. But I love his Dean Malenko in ECW stuff because it's just pure like wrestling. Like he doesn't have his charisma yet. He doesn't have his like cool gimmick and stuff that he did. He's just out there wrestling and putting on matches, in a place where there's 300 people who want to see someone get like their head bashed in. He really they both turned the crowd around. And then that was like a big key to some of that other ECW stuff that wasn't hardcore. So I really appreciate that. I go back and watch those matches a lot.
Yeah, so we're at the point of the list where everybody's the GOAT to me, right? Eddie Guerrero is the GOAT because he mastered every aspect of professional wrestling. Mastered it,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And obviously he has transcended his time on this earth by inspiring so many of the future generations. And also came from a rough upbringing and made it all the way to the top of the wrestling business.
Could have relied on his name too. Wrestling family, right? A big wrestling family. Could have just kind of rode out the coattails, lived off his name, but didn't. And dare I say, maybe I'm biased. Maybe became the best Guerrero ever.
The best
Definitely.
Guerrero ever?
Right?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
No question, right? Okay,
100%.
good.
100%. Actually, one person I'm realizing is not on here that I wanted to be, but we can figure that out. All right, the next person I want to talk about, The Rock. The Rock as the greatest of all time. There is a case here, folks. Go back and watch The Rock. That's the case for him being the greatest of all time. So The Rock comes on the scene in 1996. He has that rough introductory period, but after that, it is the top of the wrestling business for the next 30 years, essentially, with breaks, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. Like the character of Hollywood Rock was sort of like the Super Shredder version of The Rock, where he's already this mega heel. The Rock was the biggest heel in the wrestling business. And then he now has this added layer of going to Hollywood and becoming a movie actor and leaving the fans. Was that really a thing before The Rock did that? It wasn't, right?
It was not really. I mean, Hogan tried. People tried, but no one was ever as good as The Rock, so no one ever got called back,
Well, the fans were literally mad at The Rock for leaving wrestling at the time.
Yeah.
So then Hollywood Rock comes back. I mean, the charisma level, The Rock is top because he went on to become he's like the most famous guy in the world, the most famous actor and the highest paid actor in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Mega actor.
We talk about cultural relevance with Ric Flair. I mean, The Rock is the number one.
Right, for sure.
Most relevant cultural person like ever in the wrestling business.
Right, because he is literally the most famous person probably ever in the wrestling business.
Yes, the good point, yes.
So, took wrestling like to a T. Like just picked up wrestling right away, picked up on all the nuance. He's got the history of having been raised by his family on both sides was in the wrestling business. His father was a wrestler who had high highs and low lows. He would go see his father at big events at Madison Square Garden, and then he'd go see his father at flea markets as a kid. And then on his mom's side, that's obviously the Inoahi Samoan wrestling dynasty. So, just born to be a wrestler, basically, The Rock. And not on this like for instance, there's differences here with everybody. Not on this list because he had the best matches. It's purely this is just the skill of The Rock was off the charts, right?
Yes.
So he comes in the Attitude Era. I'm going to give you my favorite, what I think is The Rock's best match here, Kris, okay?
Yes.
The 1998 SummerSlam ladder match against Triple H. That's what I think is his best ever match.
Okay.
Right? Some matches that you may have been thinking of that he's most known for that are some of his best matches. He had a trilogy of matches with Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 15, 17, and 19. He had the Royal Rumble 99 I Quit match against Mankind. He had the empty arena match during Halftime Heat against Mankind. Hulk Hogan versus The Rock, Icon versus Icon, WrestleMania 18. 2 matches against John Cena. Once in a lifetime became twice in a lifetime. Like I said, these are not the best matches that I'm listing off here, but that's why he's not number 1. But as far as all around making people laugh, charisma, storytelling, match quality, and essentially his impact on the culture, he's got to be on the list. The Rock.
He has to be. Yeah. Yep.
You know,
he was one of the most important guys in one of the most important times in the business. So
he was a generational talent. Like, I
Absolutely.
mean, all of these people are, but you know, he definitely could carry the wrestling business like few others. All right, let's move on. Who else we got here? I'm going to remove one person, so then we'll get down to, I think, a total of 12. So just to recap here, we've talked about Ric Flair. We've talked about the Great Muta. We've talked about Eddie Guerrero. We've talked about The Rock. Let us now talk about Terry Funk.
Perfect.
Folks, once you dive into the career of Terry Funk, it's hard to say anybody else is the greatest wrestler of all time. You know? I mean, just because it was before most of our time
yeah.
doesn't mean it wasn't important, you know? Terry Funk had a career going from the 70s to, I don't even know when his career ended, like 2010? Something like that.
At least, yeah.
Terry Funk wrestled across 6 decades, staying relevant the entire time. You know, he was he was a territory wrestler. He was part of the 80s wrestling boom, the 90s Renaissance, and even in the 2000s still wrestling.
A modern marvel.
Obviously, he has his deathmatch legacy in ECW, in Japan. He had famous matches with Mick Foley, Sabu, really everybody in ECW. I mean, he wrestled all over the world. NWA, WWF, WCW, ECW, FMW, Ring of Honor, All Japan. He had some of those decades he spent as a technical wrestler. Then he became the craziest deathmatch wrestler in the world.
Yes.
You know, and the entire time he would be the most sympathetic babyface imaginable, right? Like, is there anybody that could get babyface heat as good as Terry Funk in a match?
No, he's that good.
Like, you just always felt like this poor bastard is getting the shit kicked out of him.
Yes. Yep. And no matter what, even if he was being the uber heel and like being the violent one, it was like, this guy is really that violent. He was just so good at doing whatever he needed to do to make you believe, you know what, this sounds cliche, but to make you believe it's real. He was whatever he needed to be, and you believed it.
And speaking of empty arena matches, Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler had an empty arena match in 1981 that was really ahead of its time. There was the famous Terry Funk Cactus Jack Headhunters match, the IWA King of the Death match.
Oh, yeah.
Terry Funk and Harley Race, Terry Funk and Sabu, Terry Funk versus Ric Flair. All of these guys that are Hall of Famers, Terry Funk was one of their contemporaries and one of their rivals. So Terry Funk was NWA World Champion, ECW Champion, and WWF Hardcore Champion. He was also U.S. Champion, and he's a WWE Hall of Famer. as far as like when you think of the term journeyman, like there's no journeyman ahead of Terry Funk.
No.
Right? Like he went on the journey. There is no other journey, right? Other than Terry Funk's career. Journeymen could die and get reborn and have another career as a journeyman, and they would not total up the accomplishments of one Terrence Funk. I don't know. I just needed to include Terry Funk on this list.
I'm glad you did. He was on my list too, and I'm like, I hope we cross on this because he was one of the best. I mean, the Ric Flair stuff in the late '80s, I love to this day still. Rewatchable. Everything's rewatchable about that. I love that.
All right, folks. Buckle the fuck up, because the next person we're going to talk about that could be the greatest wrestler of all time. It's so hard for me not to say this person. This person is my favorite wrestler of all time in my entire life. And that, of course, is Stone Cold Steve Austin. So his run was about 4 years in total in WWF, about 97 to 2002-ish. He was the face of the Attitude Era. He was the height of the wrestling business. The height of the wrestling business was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, yeah.
The Attitude Era. He was essentially the leader of the Attitude Era. He had the promos. The promos were transcendent. The promos were making people watch wrestling who didn't. His promos would make teachers ask kids in my class as a child in 4th grade, is that shirt you're wearing a Bible reference? No, it's not. That's not one of the criteria for being the greatest of all time, though. It's just an interesting fact. So, when you heard the glass shatter, you knew there was an ass kicker that was going to come out. And that is a criteria in and of itself, is someone who comes off as legitimate. Legitimacy, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Legitimacy is the technical term. I just call it being a believable ass kicker, you know? And I don't think there was anybody more believable when they were walking out to the ring that they were about to stomp a mud hole in your ASS than Steve Austin. Like, have you ever seen anybody look more pissed off than that in your entire life?
No, I have not to this day.
You know? In-ring ability, like we talked about, Eddie Guerrero. In-ring ability. Stone Cold is underrated as possibly the greatest technical wrestler of all time.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Bret Hart, who has their Hall of Fame match, the submission match at WrestleMania 13.
13, yeah.
Bret Hart says Stone Cold Steve Austin is the greatest wrestler of all time. So, that's an endorsement.
I mean, I was there for the Attitude Era, of course, so I remember that very clearly, but I often find myself going back now watching his WCW run where he was in the Stud Stable, you know, Dangerous Alliance, the Hollywood Blondes, and I'm like, this guy is a great wrestler. Even at the beginning of his WWE career, facing off with like Mark Marrow and stuff, like, you're like, man, he could really go in the ring. He was a great seller, very technical, did all the fun moves, awesome. So add that to his list. Great promo, all his ECW stuff when he was only there for like a few months. Great stuff there. Funny guy too. And then I know it's stupid and it was dumb of this to happen, but even when he turned heel in the 2000s, that stuff is, if you go back now, since it's not, you know, I was disappointed back then because I just wanted my ass kicking Steve Austin, right? But now I go back and watch it and I'm like, he's so good at being a paranoid, like Weasley heel guy too.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like,
underrated as a smarmy heel, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
So good.
When he's with Deborah and he's like trying to talk to the other heels. It's just
so good.
Hilarious. When he's singing Kumbaya with Kurt Angle with the hat on and everything.
Unbelievable.
It's just some of the best entertainment, you know? And for him to be able to do that. So some of the biggest wrestling feuds of all time have featured Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, Kris would say, is probably the best rivalry in wrestling history.
Mm-hmm.
So some of his best matches, obviously, there's only one match in the WWE Hall of Fame. It's Stone Cold versus Bret Hart, right? So it at least is the first match to be recognized as a Hall of Fame worthy match. So we have Stone Cold was a 6-time WWF champion, 2-time Intercontinental champion, 4-time WWE Tag Team champion. Stone Cold was the tag team champions with Shawn Michaels, Dude Love, Triple H, and The Undertaker. All people he was feuding with at the time. Every time
Lovely.
Stone Cold Steve Austin became tag team champions, it was with somebody he was like one of his rivals that he had to become partners with. He was the 1996 King of the Ring. He won 3 Royal Rumbles, 97, 98, 2001. Is he the only 3-time winner?
I believe he is, yes.
Hall of Fame in 2009, inducted again this past year. So, I mean, Stone Cold's best match. It's the blood-soaked submission match from WrestleMania 13, right?
Yes.
Another one of my favorite Stone Cold matches is the 3 Stages of Hell match with Triple H at No Way Out 2001. Just a fun, violent match. And Stone Cold would have these kind of matches on Raw. That was the thing, is there's no one match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was every time he came out and wrestled, you knew what you were getting, and you got your money's worth.
Yep.
So he could be the greatest of all time. We could stop this conversation and end the podcast. But I've got a few more folks to get to before we make a final determination. All right, the next person we have got to talk about, folks. Again, I just said Stone Cold Steve Austin was my favorite wrestler of all time. My first favorite wrestler of all time is the next person we're going to talk about, and that is the excellence of execution, Bret the Hitman Hart. So he was known as the excellence of execution because that's exactly what he was. Perfection in the ring all the time.
Yes.
In-ring psychology, chain wrestling, pacing. He made all of these things look so sublime and easy that you didn't even recognize how great Bret Hart was until you saw somebody else who wasn't as good try something, you know?
Yep.
Another one who was like legitimacy, it was just baked into Bret Hart's wrestling character. The idea that he could really beat you up. He's not out here to talk trash all the time, but he could legitimately beat you up because that was his style, because that's what he thought wrestling was, right? Almost never injured anybody. Some of the greatest stories in wrestling involved Bret Hart over the years. He excelled in making every match seem like a real fight. He could work with anybody. Bam Bam Bigelow, Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold Steve Austin, you name it, Vader, Yokozuna. Bret Hart can work with all these guys. Obviously, his career was not the longest because of moving over to WCW and getting kicked in the head by Bill Goldberg. Someone who was not on this list.
Oh, man. Just kidding.
And another one who influenced a generation of wrestlers with his essentially commitment to his style of wrestling. And he was a star across the world, US, Canada, Europe, you name it. And is one of the most widely respected wrestlers and revered by fans, peers, and critics. Yeah, nothing bad to say about Bret Hart.
I mean, he has so many great matches that there's some that I forget or didn't even know he had. Like, I didn't even really realize in '95 him and Bulldog at In Your House had a great match, because there's just so many. I think about the SummerSlam one. I think about I love the match with Razor Ramon, the first King of the Ring. I love the Iron Man match. So there's just so many that I can't even think of them sometimes. I don't even remember how many great matches he had.
Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, Survivor Series 1992.
Unbelievable match. You're right.
Bret was the champion, you know, at that time. You wouldn't even think of like Shawn Michaels as like, yeah, Shawn's better than Bret at the time. But so Bret Hart is somebody who had some of the most legendary and best wrestling matches of all time, right? It wasn't just that he would come out and perform consistently every night and entertain the crowds and excel. He did have these matches that were amazing and transcend, their time period. WrestleMania 13 versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, SummerSlam 1992 versus the British Bulldog, WrestleMania 10 versus Owen Hart. Just a masterclass, a technical masterclass between two brothers. Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 1991.
Yep.
Shawn Michaels, since I mentioned, a little sleeper there, Survivor Series 92. Rowdy Piper, WrestleMania 8. This was just fun. Yep. Great.
There's so many.
And, because every time Bret Hart went out there, he went out there to have those kind of matches. So he was a 5-time WWF champion, a 2-time Intercontinental champion, quite possibly the best Intercontinental champion of all time. 2-time tag team champion, 1993 King of the Ring winner, 94 Royal Rumble winner with Lex Luger, and now a 3-time WWE Hall of Famer by himself with the Hart Foundation and with Stone Cold Steve Austin for their match at WrestleMania 13. He was also a 2-time WCW World Champion and 4-time WCW US champion, thanks Vince Russo, and 1-time WCW Tag Team Champion, with Goldberg.
God.
So, a wrestler's wrestler, right? No gimmicks, just mastery when it comes to Bret the Hitman Hart. So, are we done? Is that it? Bret's the best? There's a couple more, folks, before we make our determinations. Spoiler, we're also saving our picks for last as well. So, another person who needs to be considered, if we're talking about people who make this wrestling seem sublime, is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. So now we're getting into the greatest of the greatest. So, Mr. WrestleMania, I do think Shawn Michaels probably has the best WrestleMania career, right? Because The Undertaker had whatever many matches, but Shawn's were just the greatest, right? So his first run, he was a tag team. He was a tag team by himself. Marty Jannetty wasn't there. He was a member of the Rockers. Then he famously threw his tag team partner through the barber shop window and turned on him and became the Heartbreak Kid. And then he had that run until he quit in 1998 after losing at WrestleMania to Stone Cold. Came back in 2002 for an epic Hall of Fame run after he had retired. So he was a great heel in an era where there were not that many great heels in the early 90s.
Yep.
And he is cited by so many of his peers as being one of the greatest of all time. Another person who could wrestle big men, brawlers, technical wrestling. He was technically flawless. Shawn Michaels, especially go back and watch some early Shawn Michaels matches. He was technically flawless even at the beginning of his career. He would do things that nobody else could do. He was 10 times better than everybody else, and he made it look so easy that you didn't even notice it.
Absolutely. My favorite, the two things that stand out the most to me about Shawn Michaels are, for some reason, I love watching old matches, and I go back and watch lots of them, but I always find myself watching Shawn Michaels matches, whether it's Mind Games, whether it's the Hell in the Cell, whether it's a random Raw where he faces Marty Jannetty for the Intercontinental title. I always find myself going back to Shawn matches, so that just says something about how good he actually was. And the other thing is his WrestleMania match with The Undertaker, the first one, that actually had brought me back from my lapsedness in wrestling. I was watching it with no sound at a Buffalo Wild Wings, waiting for a UFC 100 to start, and I'm no sound from far away, just watching this match, going like, "Wow, wrestling's actually, that's why I love wrestling," and I haven't stopped watching since. So
just checking out like one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time happening, and you're like, "Oh, I love that wrestling stuff.
And I was back.
So, Shawn Michaels, 3-time WWE champion, 1-time world champion, 3-time intercontinental champion, European champion, 6-time tag team champion, 2-time Royal Rumble winner, and 2-time Hall of Famer. All right, these are his best matches. Are you ready? Not in any order. WrestleMania 25 versus The Undertaker. WrestleMania 26 versus The Undertaker. WrestleMania 21 versus Kurt Angle. The ladder match at WrestleMania 10 versus Razor Ramon. The 60-minute Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12 against Bret Hart. WrestleMania 24 versus Ric Flair. You mentioned Mind Games 1996. Mankind, that was a great match. He had a 1-hour match against John Cena on Raw one time.
Incredible.
He had a very good ladder match against Chris Jericho at No Mercy in 2008. It was like when Jericho was on that super heel run and he punched Shawn Michaels' wife in the face.
Yep.
Comeback match against Triple H in the ladder match. That 2002 SummerSlam ladder match, I remember watching. I was not clued in. I don't know what I was smoking, but I thought it was not going to be a career return for Shawn Michaels. I thought he was like just coming back to do a program with Triple H. And it's like, because Triple H like beat him up, like it was really emotionally charged. And he's like, I'll come back for this match. And then he comes back. They have this brawl. He wins, and then he's just back forever.
Yeah,
like he's the world champion at the end of the year. It's crazy. Yeah, he did win the first ever Elimination Chamber match.
Yeah, he did. Oh yeah.
So he started D-Generation X. Was a member of the Clique. Just discussed every conversation about the greatest of all time includes Shawn Michaels. He might be the greatest of all time. If we're talking about people who inspired a generation, you've got a literal generation on television right now that is completely inspired by Shawn Michaels. Literally, not even just the people that he's working directly with as the head of NXT. I mean, AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, Johnny Gargano, Adam Cole. These guys all credit Shawn Michaels with being the person who they aspire to be like the most, right?
Oh.
And there's more. It's so many people. Like Shawn Michaels is the reason why we have the work rate that we have today, basically.
Yes.
You know? So, and a lot of his peers and his not predecessors, but the people that came after him will all say Shawn Michaels, greatest of all time. Not quite ready to make that determination yet. As we go on here, we got a couple of more folks. All right. The next person we have got to talk about, we talked a lot about the 70s and the 80s, but we need to talk about the person who carried WWE through the dark days and established himself as one of the greatest of all time. And that is the tribal chief, Roman Reigns. How do you not say Roman Reigns is the greatest of all time, Kris?
Man, I think detractors might say that some people are better in the ring than him. Not saying that he's bad, but people might say that there's people who are at another level than he is. Some might wrongly talk about his force on our throats run, which you shouldn't. That wasn't his fault. But I like to point to sometimes I remember a match on SmackDown, him and Buddy Murphy. Or I remember some AJ Styles matches with him, even in those dark Roman Reigns times, that I'm like, wow, this guy actually can go. So it's hard. He's definitely the modern day greatest of all time.
For sure. And I think to turn the page from being rejected wholly by the audience, like who was rejected more in recent years than in the past 20 years than Roman Reigns? Who has been the people, if you said, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, the thumb was down on Roman Reigns unanimously, right?
Oh, yeah.
He was the poster child for everything wrong with WWE's writing and storytelling for a while. Yeah. And like you said, shoving him down our throats. To go from that to being the most popular and loved must-see wrestler on the planet where there is one like there is, if Roman comes back, Roman is the main event anytime.
Yeah.
Right. So started off with the Shield. The Shield broke up. He was then forced down our throat as a singles wrestler. Then he sort of there was just a turn, and the turn happened. I don't want to say it was because he announced that he had leukemia, because he was already kind of on the upswing. Like, if you go back and watch, people were not really hating on him in that like month period or so before that.
Yep.
He announces that unfortunately he has leukemia and it is back and he has to leave. Right? He's gone. He comes back and it's like he's popular. He's a babyface again. Right? Everybody's happy to see him. They must have realized what we were missing, right, when he was gone. So then he comes back, and then the COVID pandemic hits, and because of his immunocompromisation, he decides to go home, right? He's off TV because of the protocols and just in general. And then he shows back up. Did he come back and he speared the Fiend? Was his comeback moment in the Thunderdome when we were already in the pandemic?
I think so.
From when he came back and he speared the Fiend, I think it was at a pay-per-view. Well, a PLE. From then on, it was taking this wrestling business to new heights and doing nothing else for Roman Reigns since he came back, right? He is the next person to take the wrestling business to new heights. He is that guy. So in that time period, he established himself as the tribal chief, which is the best character possibly ever in WWE.
Yep.
The Bloodline run and the Bloodline story is possibly the best ever in WWE. The story told about the Bloodline and everything with the Usos and Sammy Uso and Solo Sikoa and everything that happened, and Paul Heyman being a part of this. Some of the best television in the history of WWE. As far as a closed loop story, possibly the best story ever told in WWE. Roman Reigns leading to Cody Rhodes, right? So it's hard to top, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So he main evented WrestleMania for like 10 years straight. Like literally main evented WrestleMania for 10 years in a row. 31, 32, 33, 34. So 35 he wasn't in the main event because he had just come back from leukemia. 36 was the pandemic. 37, 38, 39, 40, and 41. Main event of WrestleMania, folks. Roman Reigns. For the last decade.
Yeah.
So he's a 4-time WWE. So also the WWE World Championship situation during Roman Reigns' run. First of all, it was convoluted, and Roman just won all the belts, making it even more convoluted. So he was a 4-time world champion, 2-time Universal champion. He is the longest reigning Universal champion he's longest reigning WWE. So he's longest reigning Universal champion at 1,316 days from 2020 to 2024. He also, along that time, acquired the WWE Undisputed Championship and merged it with the Universal Championship to create the WWE Undisputed Universal Champion. He's also been Intercontinental United States Champion. He won the 2015 Royal Rumble. He is a Grand Slam champion. And as I mentioned, he headlined WrestleMania for 10 by God years. He has been nothing other than a main eventer since... Like I said, since he came back, since he speared the Fiend. His shirt said needle mover, and that is because he was the needle mover for professional wrestling. So I think he's underrated in the ring because he hasn't really been given the chance to have these classics with folks. But as far as ring psychology, athleticism, just overall matches, and storytelling in the match, Roman Reigns is up there amongst the greatest. He can wrestle old aging legends. He could wrestle indie wrestlers, and he established himself as essentially the top draw in all of wrestling at the moment. And now he's basically just gone again.
Yeah.
But, as far as the greatest of all time, okay, folks. Roman Reigns' best matches. Cody Rhodes, WrestleMania 39. Brock Lesnar, WrestleMania 38. Edge and Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 37 is underrated. Hell in a Cell. The I Quit match with Jey Uso at Hell in a Cell 2020. The match against Sami Zayn from Elimination Chamber 2023. So I'm just going to name a couple more, but then I want to say something about these matches. Drew McIntyre, Clash of the Castle 22. Kevin Owens, any of the Royal Rumble matches he had against Kevin Owens. Seth Rollins at the Royal Rumble 2022. He had a good match against Cesaro. He had a fantastic match against Daniel Bryan at Fastlane. I can't remember the year. And these more recent matches during his run as the Tribal Chief, folks, this is why people watch wrestling. Like, this is the one person on this list that I can confidently say, Roman Reigns, all of these matches these matches elevated WWE. Roman Reigns elevated WWE and with it, the entire wrestling business over the past basically 5 years. So that's the legacy that he's built. Not to mention the legacy of the Anoa'i dynasty that was completely elevated by the whole Bloodline saga. And he is likely the next person that we will see go on to Hollywood and then can come back as Hollywood Roman Reigns.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's what I have to say about Roman. He's hard to deny as far as relevance goes. And record-breaking dominance at the top of the wrestling business, to me, is good argument to be considered one of the greatest of all time. But alas, there's a few more, folks. We got more people. All right, so let me go here and see who I haven't talked about. It's getting to be that time. So, all right, Kris. The next person that we have to talk about is arguably the greatest wrestler of all time, and that is Kurt Angle. Okay, so we only have a few more picks to get to, and then we're going to get to the end. But, so, Kurt Angle is the blueprint of a perfect pro wrestler, right? He came into pro wrestling after winning gold in wrestling at the 1996 Olympics. Olympic gold medalist, your Olympic hero. And picked up pro wrestling and ascended to the highest level of the wrestling business very quickly. And he had an intensity that is unmatched, right? Would you say anybody was as intense as Kurt Angle in the entire history of the wrestling business?
I would say no, because you also believed it because he was a legitimate gold medalist as well. So some people who might be intense, you're like, this guy is pretty intense. But like deep down, Kurt Angle could actually amateur wrestle you to death as well.
So he was unparalleled as far as his ability in the ring, right? No one could do what Kurt Angle could do because they weren't Kurt Angle. They weren't an Olympic gold medalist wrestler. He would pick people up and throw them, right? That's essentially what everybody in wrestling does. But, flawless chain wrestling, technical excellence, and, like I said, intensity and athleticism led to some of the craziest matches in wrestling history involving Kurt Angle. And anything that he would do to your body, he would do to his own body.
That's right.
Underrated as someone who destroyed their own body, right? Because, we're not going to talk about his affectionate nickname of Perk Angle, but he put his body through so much, especially in the period where he was gone from WWE.
Yes.
But he could adapt to almost any style of wrestling. And, mic skills, character work, he had periods where he would be comedic They filled the ring with milk one night, you know. But as far as pedigree, it's he's alone as far as the pedigree of an athlete in this wrestling business, right? Multiple time world champion WWE and TNA. I think a lot more of Kurt Angle's greatness was done in TNA just because of the insanity involved. So he's also the only wrestler to win the WWE, TNA, IWGP, and WCW world titles. And he was a main eventer for about 2 decades. Match of the year candidates almost every year. I would say his biggest rivals were Shawn Michaels, Samoa Joe, Brock Lesnar, The Undertaker, Eddie Guerrero. So some of his best matches. Definitely Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 21. He had a match against Stone Cold at SummerSlam 2001. Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 19. Classic. He also had an underrated classic with The Undertaker at No Way Out 2006.
Very good.
We already talked about his match against Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania 20. Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle, Genesis 2006. Just a hard-hitting, awesome match. So many matches with AJ Styles from 2008 to 2010. Just those guys were just killing it. So he had a match against this little-known guy named Desmond Wolfe, you know, in TNA. That was an all-timer, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love the Iron Man match with Brock Lesnar on SmackDown. I'll never forget that one. And also, it was when he opened SummerSlam 2002 against Rey Mysterio. 9 minutes of a perfect match.
Yeah, so Kurt Angle, 4-time WWE champion, former world champion, Intercontinental. He was the Eurocontinental champion, if you remember.
Of course.
Hardcore champion, tag team champion, 2000 King of the Ring, and he's a WWE Hall of Famer. He is a 6-time TNA world champion, former X Division tag team champion, IWGP heavyweight champion, and TNA Hall of Famer. I think he was the first person in the TNA Hall of Fame.
I believe so, yeah.
So, and one thing about Kurt Angle is we often talk a lot about, you know, if the UFC and mixed martial arts were around 20 years ago, 10 years ago, in a different period, which guys could cross over to MMA and do good, kind of like Brock Lesnar did. And the answer is Kurt Angle and nobody else. Because, yes, guys had amateur wrestling backgrounds and they may have fared pretty well against the right opponent in a cage fight. Batista dabbled in MMA. CM Punk dabbled in the UFC. So my opinion is that Kurt Angle would have, at the right time, as long as he wasn't prior to his body getting destroyed, would have been the greatest UFC fighter of all time, because I think he would have been unbeatable. And that is an insane thing to say about anybody, but if you know what Kurt Angle was capable of at the time and where the heavyweight skill level was at in MMA, I mean, even if he just didn't get destroyed in his wrestling career, even if he just aged and then decided to do UFC at a later age, he still would have destroyed most people in the UFC. I think that Kurt Angle would have probably handily beat Brock Lesnar in an MMA fight.
Oh, yeah.
And all part of the legitimacy doesn't need to be... You don't even need to talk about Kurt Angle's legitimacy because he showed it to you in pro wrestling. Like, you don't get to the point where you can... Like, he would be going at this unmatched work rate for longer than anybody else, right? Like, in these matches.
Yes.
It's just hard to quantify, right? So, Kurt Angle, I think he is unmatched as the most skilled pro wrestler of all time. The most capable athlete in the history of pro wrestling.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to sell me, brother.
So, only a few left here, folks, and then we're going to kind of let you know our thoughts, because I'm calling everybody the greatest here. So, one person who has had some of the best bouts in the history of pro wrestling, perhaps the best bouts. Some might even say this person was a best bout machine. And of course, I am talking about Kenny Omega. How can you not say Kenny Omega is the greatest of all time, is my question.
I can't answer that one.
So, Kenny Omega. My notes are glitching out on me. All right, so Kenny Omega is the modern day perfect pro wrestler, okay? A master of Japanese and American wrestling. So he is on the lighter side of being a heavyweight, so he's a work rate guy. He can master the junior heavyweight style, along with the being in there with some of the bigger wrestlers like Okada. He has a series of rivals that he has these emotional connections with, both friend and foe. Storytelling, Ibushi, Okada, Hangman, these are the best stories in wrestling of the past decade, let's say, right? He's called the best bout machine. He is called the god of pro wrestling. His promos are a little bit different than everybody else's, but he's eloquent. He is cerebral. He is very self-aware, and I just think that his promos are uniquely great. Kenny Omega. He can have comedic bouts. Kenny Omega one time wrestled a 9-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. He got some heat for that one. So, and he can have 1-hour classics. So we have to dive right into Kenny Omega's best matches because there are so many. But first, we're going to talk about his titles here, if I got those. So, he was the first foreign IWGP heavyweight champion in like 20 years. He is a former AEW world champion. He is a former AAA mega champion. So at one time, Kenny Omega was the AEW champion, the AAA mega champion, the TNA world heavyweight champion, all at the same time. He has a background in indie wrestling from PWG, DDT, Ring of Honor, all the way up to main eventing the Tokyo Dome. So now we got to go into just some of Kenny Omega's best matches. All right, so Kenny Omega versus Okada, Wrestle Kingdom 11. Dave Meltzer gave this match 6 stars. Dominion 2017, a 60-minute epic that received 6.25 stars, a time limit draw against Okada. Then we have the G1 Climax 2017. Omega finally pins Okada in a 30-minute, just mind-blowing sprint. Then, folks, Dominion 2018, 2 out of 3 falls. Omega defeats Okada in what many call the greatest match of all time, which received 7 stars from Dave Meltzer. Another 5-star match, Omega versus Chris Jericho in Wrestle Kingdom 12. I would argue, in 2018, I would argue that Omega versus Jericho from Wrestle Kingdom 12 is the most influential wrestling match anytime after the year 2000. No, as far as the impact this wrestling match had, all the tendrils in the world of wrestling right now, where this match is the source of those.
Yeah.
Omega versus Kota Ibushi, one of the most emotional rivalries, years and years of storytelling, culminated in the G1 Climax 2018, Golden Lovers. Omega versus Jon Moxley. This was one of the most fun feuds in AEW that goes under the radar. They had this lights out match. They had the Winter is Coming match. They had in the lights out match, they had the barbed wire spider web, and just Jon Moxley's whole arrival in AEW and Kenny Omega being right there, being a part of it, was great. And then also, by the way, Kenny Omega has had some of the best tag team matches of all time as part of his tag team with Hangman Page against the Young Bucks. So, yeah. Kenny Omega and Hangman versus the Young Bucks, AEW Revolution 2020 was the match of the year. Essentially, it's like a 6-star tag team match. Meltzer didn't give it 6 stars. I'm just saying that now. Okay, any more Omega matches here? So the influence Kenny Omega has spans the entire globe: Japan, North America, Mexico, Reseda, California, you name it.
That's
So he obviously has had to, adapt a little bit as time goes on. He was a member of the Bullet Club. Then he was the Cleaner, the Best Battle Machine, the AEW World Champion. Then he became the Belt Collector. Wrestler of the Year in 2017. PWI #1 in 2021. Multiple-time Wrestling Observer Wrestler of the Year. He has the most 5+ star matches in history. And he is, as I mentioned, a former AEW, IWGP Heavyweight Champion, AAA Mega Champion, IWGP US Champion, which he really kind of had some good feuds with that belt. AEW Trios Champion and a former AEW Tag Team Champion. And he also got bit on the hand by Ace Steel in an epic match.
One of the second most influential match after the 2000.
In the infamous Brawl Out. So the thing about Omega is that he is pushing the boundaries of in-ring storytelling and athleticism. He helped build AEW from the ground up. He was the face of Japanese wrestling. He's now inspired a new generation of wrestlers who have come up and are trying to kind of emulate his level of precision, psychology, and creativity. So I just feel like Kenny Omega's catalog of elite level matches is unmatched. And a lot of people have strong claims. Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, Okada, whomever else, which we didn't talk about Okada. But I think Omega blends every era's style into a multi-dimensional hybrid that reshaped the modern wrestling world. Thank you. And that's actually not my pick. Spoiler. So, folks, we got one pick left. And Kris, before I tell you who I think the greatest wrestler of all time is, let's go through your pick. I know we already talked about your person, and we didn't talk about mine yet, but so who is your pick of all these names and maybe some other ones that we haven't mentioned? Who is your pick for the greatest of all time?
My pick is Kurt Angle. He is my favorite of all time. Well, Austin's my favorite of all time, but I think Angle is my pick for the greatest. I think we talked about his in-ring prowess. I think he was great at all, whether he was serious, ass kicker, comedy, on the mic, in the ring, longevity, no matter who you put him against. For some reason, I remember all his matches, but for some reason, I remember when on random SmackDown, when he just got his head shaved bald, he came out with a wig and the headgear.
Yeah, the headgear.
And I just always remember that. It was so funny. I still remember it to this day, whether it was Team Eck, whether it was the Wrestling Machine, ECW.
ENC and Kurt was underrated. Some of those segments with Edge and Christian and Kurt Angle, the backstage segments were just so funny.
Oh yeah, he was just good at every single thing. Like you mentioned, Eddie Guerrero was an A+ in everything in the ring, and he was. I think Kurt Angle was an A+ in every criteria that you lit at the beginning, and that's why he's the greatest of all time to me.
Right. So he comes in as this unmatched, with unmatched ability, and then he picks up wrestling so quickly that he just fast forwards himself to the top of the wrestling business, right?
Oh yeah.
And then he kind of just gets bored with being the best, so he decides, I'm going to be the best while destroying my body. And I'm going to do moonsaults onto nothing for the next 8 years. So there's this one scene on Impact, I think it was at a pay-per-view, where he's coming off, he does a moonsault supposed to be onto Abyss, and he just lands on the metal stage, and he just bounces off of it. And there are so many scenes. Kurt Angle, I mean, he was really one of the first people to do the moonsault off of the higher cage.
Yeah, insane.
I mean, just the moonsaults alone are worthy of being called the greatest of all time.
I think what sums up Kurt Angle to me is just, there was another in TNA against Abyss when he just dead sprints off the stage, does a front flip, hits Abyss, lands on his feet, woos, pulls down his straps, woos again. That's Kurt Angle to me.
It's just he's an insane person. And so it's like he could do these things better, faster, and more often than everybody else. And then he could do that for an hour. You know what I mean? Like he was called the wrestling machine because he just could go forever. And at the pace he could go at forever was unmatched. He would just throw people around like in between moves. It's just, he was the wrestling machine.
Incredible. So
I mean, I do think he's on an island as far as, like I said, ability. Like if you just had like a suplex combine, like Kurt Angle is winning that thing. You know what I mean? Like he's getting drafted. So, but there is one person that I want to mention that we haven't brought up yet. That I do. This is my pick after poring over this list. I have got to say that, you know, when discussing the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, names like Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Kazuchika Okada often come up. But in the modern wrestling landscape, Bryan Danielson makes an unbeatable... Fuck, I already fucked it up. We're an hour and 16 minutes in. Bryan Danielson makes an unbeatable case as the greatest to ever step in the ring. So you want to talk about technical mastery? Bryan Danielson is a master of every wrestling style across the globe. He is a hybrid of Japanese, American, Mexican, and European styles. He is the true best wrestler in the world, best wrestler of all time, because like I said, he is a hybrid of strong style, submission grappling, and the storytelling psychology on display by Bryan Danielson is unmatched. So he is the greatest independent wrestler of all time. Already, full stop. He's the greatest independent wrestler of all time. Sorry, Punk. And then turned into main event wrestling star. So he was the ultimate underdog in WWE, right? He has this whole career run as a complete indie legend in Ring of Honor, right? Greatest Ring of Honor wrestler of all time, Bryan Danielson. Then he comes to WWE. He's kind of instantly recognized as this sort of anointed king of the indies when he comes there. And the fans kind of recognize that immediately, but WWE as a company doesn't quite yet. So the fans, for years, hijacking the show for the guys that they wanted to see in higher spots. Now, at the time, CM Punk was also in WWE, so the fans liked Punk more than Bryan. I'll give you that. Once Punk was gone, it was as if there was nobody else on the roster for the WWE fan base. Daniel Bryan was their guy. And that led to the WrestleMania 30, where Bryan beat all of Evolution in one night and won the what was it called at the time? Was it the Undisputed?
Yeah, it was Undisputed, yeah, because it was both belts, so they were undisputed, yeah.
He won the Undisputed Championship. He beat Triple H in the opening match. Then he beat Randy Orton and Batista in the main event of WrestleMania 30. He also headlined WrestleMania 37 7 years later. So Bryan had to retire because of his head injury. Comes back, main events WrestleMania 7 against WrestleMania 37. He didn't main event WrestleMania 7. He didn't go against Slaughter. But against Roman Reigns and Edge. So every comeback he had. So one thing about Daniel is whenever he wasn't in the very top program, the fan base was upset about that. All the time. So WrestleMania 30, he wins the World Championship. A year later, at WrestleMania 31, he's in the opening match, still winning the Intercontinental title in a multi-man ladder match. But everybody was like, why? Why isn't Bryan in the main event?
Yeah.
So like I said, he retired because of his head injuries. He comes back, and he's right in the main event scene. So he was the Planet's champion. He had a WWE title crafted for himself. Not many guys have that. So as far as career highlights in WWE, 4-time WWE champion, former world champion, tag team champion with Kane and Team Hell No, We had the Yes movement, which started off as a real fan revolt against WWE's booking, which they then co-opted to book Daniel into the main event. WrestleMania 30 comes around, wins the World Heavyweight Championship. No, this is what it was called, Chris. It was called the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. That's what it was called. Because remember, it was both, and they had a vote.
Yeah, it was both, yeah.
So he's forced to retire in 2016. He comes back in 2018. Was he really only gone for 2 years? Some of these numbers might not be accurate here. Sorry, we're getting to the end of the show. So he reinvents himself as the planet's champion. One of the best heels as well, coming out here chastising people for not being enough. He was a heel as an environmentalist. He was a part of Kofi Mania. He lost the world title to Kofi, or the WWE title to Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania 35 in one of the most emotional WrestleMania matches ever. So then he goes to AEW after WrestleMania 37 with Roman and Edge. He goes to AEW, and this is where he becomes the best in the world, undoubtedly, in my opinion. So his debut match was a 30-minute classic at Grand Slam against Kenny Omega in 2021. Match of the year contender in a draw. He had insane matches against Hangman Page, MJF, Zack Sabre Jr., Kazuchika Okada, and Ricky Starks. So he was part of the Blackpool Combat Club until ultimately Moxley turned on him and, killed him. But before that happened, he helped get over Kofi, Sami Zayn, and in AEW, even people like MJF and Ricky Starks. So he was a student, a consummate student of the game in pro wrestling. So he's got the GOAT resume, folks, okay? WrestleMania 30 wins the WWE Championship. TLC 2011 cashes in, wins the world title. Fastlane 2021, this was actually the match that I was talking about earlier, against Roman Reigns. This is where it gets heady. AEW Grand Slam, a draw with Kenny Omega. So AEW Full Gear 2023 versus Zack Sabre Jr. This, in my opinion, is the greatest technical wrestling match of all time. AEW Revolution 2023, he has possibly the best Iron Man match of all time against MJF. And I know that people think that the Iron Man match with HBK and Bret Hart was incredible. Watch the first half of that match, and then watch the Iron Man match with Bryan. So, classic matches with Nigel, Kenta, AJ Styles, Roman Reigns, Edge, Kenny Omega, MJF. The match with Okada at Forbidden Door where he broke his arm, incredible match. Bryan Danielson has dominated every major promotion. He revolutionized what it means to be a top guy. He influenced generations of wrestlers. He delivered some of the most emotionally resonant and technically brilliant matches ever, and he maintained an elite in-ring performance into his 40s. Whether you measure greatness by in-ring ability, storytelling, influence, versatility, or moments, Bryan Danielson checks every box. He is the best ever, folks. Your Honor, I rest my case. The prosecution rests.
Hey, that's a great pick. And if anyone says that you're wrong, I don't know. I don't know if I believe them. I don't believe them. What are you watching, pal?
Hey, who you been talking to, pal? Well,
I just want to say I want to say that the WWE actually should give Dana Bryan a little more money, because the only reason I got the network was because of the Yes movement, and I've had it ever since.
Dude, do you remember that Ricky Starks, Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson dog collar? Was it the dog collar or no, the strap match?
Yeah.
When Punk left AEW, and then it was supposed to be Punk against Ricky Starks, and then Bryan's got Ricky Starks' eyes bugging out of his head. Amazing.
Yeah, he's great. He also put over Daniel Garcia in Worcester once.
We saw Daniel Garcia beat Bryan Danielson unconscious at Dynamite in Worcester, Mass. He had the famous moment where, as part of the NXT, or was it the Nexus? Was he part of the Nexus? When they revolted and he choked out Justin Roberts with his own tie and got legit fired from WWE. Mm-hmm. Then during Anarchy in the Arena in AEW, Justin Roberts is the ring announcer. Cut to, Bryan is just choking Justin Roberts again with the tie.
Storytelling.
A master. A true master. No, folks, that's my opinion on this. You could make the case for any of these guys. We left out some names. We didn't really go into detail about Okada, Macho Man, Dusty Rhodes, other folks, Ludwig Borga. There's tons of names that we didn't get to that could be considered the greatest. I mean, he beat the Tonka streak, man.
So I cried.
I like how the first word is like, don't. All right, folks. Well, we are cooked, as the kids say, so we got to get out of here. Thank you for checking out this episode. We hope that we have laid the foundation for you to understand why any of these folks, whether it be Terry Funk, Roman Reigns, Eddie Guerrero, Keiji Muto, Bret Hart, Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, The Rock, Kenny Omega, Bryan Danielson, Ric Flair, or... that's it. Any of these guys could be considered the greatest of all time. And I'm sure you have your own pick. So let us know. If you're watching this video on YouTube, thank you. And let us know in the comments. Hit us up on social media. Let's continue this discussion so I can keep telling you that Bryan Danielson is the greatest wrestler of all time.